Thanks for joining Creativity versus Process. So what are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, I'm working towards a show in Sydney in early next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying a new process for developing my work where I'm using a machine learning algorithm. Bit of a project in development. It's not quite finalised yet, but it is interesting to work on.
So I think it's probably good if you describe what your creative process is from day to day.
I mean, I pretty much, I'll take you right through the minutiae.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I get up, say, about 6:30, walk the dog for an hour, usually listening to the news, like Radio National. Get the kids ready for school, make their breakfast, and then I head into the studio at about 8:30. Play a couple of games of chess. That's a thing that's not really part of the process exactly, I suppose. But maybe it is. I just feel like I need to do something when I get to the studio to
get the brain working.
Yeah, or maybe just change my relationship to time, because the morning is a bit of a flurry at home, of course. So then just change tempo a bit when I get into the studio, and then I'm pretty much ready to start working. And it's nice to begin by just putting some paint on a surface on a work somewhere. So even if it's not heading towards a finalised work, but it's like just to break through, in a sense that that barrier overcome. Sometimes it feels like there's a little force field between the work and the brush. But it's nice just to break through that and get something happening. And then either that translates into an ongoing session of work, or I'll then go off and start working on something else, whether it's maybe some research, or sometimes I need to write an artist statement or something like that. So that's typically how I get into the studio. I guess on a day-to-day. It's a little bit different to the creative process, I suppose. So the actual generation of a particular artwork maybe follows its own sort of trajectory, and usually I'm working from an archive of images that I gather over time on a range of topics, and just thinking about ways that I can combine them or interpret them and create work. So for example, I did a series where I was looking at space helmets and parts of spacesuits, and combining them with features of animals or birds, and it took many hours of research of finding the right images of spacesuits, the right images of helmets, the right birds, thinking about how they could sit together, constructing paintings, and like a lot of that happens in Photoshop primarily.
All right.
And then goes onto the canvas, and then often goes back into Photoshop. So I'll photograph the work while it's in progress, take that back into Photoshop, and then continue manipulating it, and then reapply those manipulations to the canvas. And so that exchange between the creation of the work on the computer and the translation of the work onto the canvas is an ongoing thing.
Right, because I actually was going to ask you about the meticulous nature of your work, because the final collections of bodies of work that you've done do look really heavily planned. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that there is a little bit of playfulness within that process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it is a lot about. I mean, that's part of the nice thing with Photoshop is being able to make radical changes very easily and seeing how they work. So there is an element, I guess, of a kind of serendipity that happens. So sometimes just a slight change to an image, or the insertion of a new element, just gels and really triggers something. And those moments are often what generates really a new body of work. So you just find some arrangement that seems to be operating on it's almost like you're trying to find something that operates on an unconscious level. So you can have an idea or a theme for a work. So okay, a lot of my work is looking at say how science is being represented in art through history, but that's potentially like a fairly dry way of approaching it, and you want to find something that triggers an emotional response and not a purely rational response. And the only way I think to effectively find that is to use play and chance to allow your own unconscious to form connections, and then be open to responding when they appear.
Yeah. And do you think that process that you've developed, has that changed over time?
It has, yeah. So I think as I have become more comfortable with handling paint, I'm more comfortable with making radical changes on the canvas. Mm-hmm. So my early paintings probably were more totally pre-planned, and once it began, the image was there would just get done through to completion without any really major changes, because I found it really difficult to alter the painting partway through. But I'm getting better at doing that, so I can make a radical change to a work, and allow those shifts to occur, so that it loosens things a little bit.
Does that make you also feel more comfortable with your process? Were you feeling a bit more uptight about it when you couldn't make changes? You're partway through something, you're not sure if it's really working.
Yeah,
but you've got to complete it, whereas now you kind of can step back and.
Yeah, I mean, definitely more comfortable. I wouldn't say I'm totally comfortable, because there's always a feeling that it's like a sunk cost fallacy. So if a work is going to take a number of hours to complete, we've sort of already sunk 100 hours into a painting, and you sort of think it's not working, but if I put another 100 hours into it, maybe it'll come good. So there is something about kind of not wanting to just trash all of this labor that you've put into it and let something go. But you have to, you have to in the end. So yeah, I'm more comfortable with that. Wouldn't say I'm totally comfortable with it. It's still always, a little bit of a push and pull. And there is something about knowing when to pull a pin on a painting and let it go. Yeah,
so I actually was going to bring up about the editing process.
Uh-huh.
How brutal are you with that? Do you have a little way of figuring out, is there a process that you use to kind of work out, what you edit out and what you leave in, especially when you're coming up to maybe an exhibition?
Yeah, there's a number of ways of doing it. Again, like photographing work is a great way of doing that. So just taking a shot on the phone gives you a totally different perspective on a work, and it just allows you to see things. So it's so strange. I can be working on a painting, looking at it, every day for a week, and then take a photo of it, and notice something in the middle of the painting that I literally haven't seen for an entire week. I don't understand how this is, but somehow, the brain is just able to not see something. It's often something quite major, and then when it's rephotographed, it just refreshes the brain somehow, and able to see these things. And so that's quite helpful. I think that destroying work is really important. So at least half of what I produce gets destroyed.
A lot of people just cried then.
Well,
that's a lot.
I mean, I would just say that the stuff that gets destroyed is not that great. So that's I wouldn't worry about it too much. But also, I feel like it's important, because if you're trying to make changes to a work and make these decisions, like if most of the work is going to go through to completion and kind of exist forever, it feels like there's this big weight on it. So everything becomes important, and so like a little decision you're making here, is going to last for years and years. But if the work is most likely just going to end up in the skip, then it doesn't really matter. Just make that change. Maybe it'll look good. Maybe it won't. It does. It's fine. If the work kind of survives, that's good. If it gets destroyed, that's normal. So I think you've got to just allow for the works to die. One of the other really useful tools is social media, and I'll often pop a work up on Instagram, and that's the main place that I'll do that. And it's not so much to necessarily gauge the response that people have, but to check my own feeling about it when it goes up there. And so if I post it up and I have like a good feeling about showing people this work, okay, that's a pretty good sign. But often when it comes to that moment of making it public, that's when I think, oh, wait a minute, I'm not totally sure about this actually, and then I usually go and take most of the images down again. So the legacy feed is pretty curated, but like day to day things go up and
so
come
that's
back down.
We know that's what's happening if something disappears. I've seen something, where's that gone? It's like you weren't that.
No, it's like the same process for producing a work is the Instagram feed. Like most of the feed has to be destroyed in order to make the feed successful. It doesn't mean that any individual post is good or bad if it gets deleted.
Do you feel pressure now that you've become really very successful in your career to make sure that to get rid of anything that's not working 100%? Is that why you've got to come to destroying it? Because you probably used to have it hanging around the studio, I imagine.
Yeah, probably. I think that's probably true. It's, but I guess that shift probably occurred really when I won the Archibald, and that was a big change in, really the amount of attention that was paid to me and my work at that particular moment. So it was probably sort of a step change then, which is 10 years ago now.
It's crazy how long.
Yeah. So since then, yes, it's probably been more conscious of the idea that you're producing works that people are going to see, and so there's a little bit more the care and attention paid to making sure that everything that goes out is 100%. Before that, I was really concerned about only making work that was good, and there was still that process of destroying like a lot of what I made. It wasn't like every work was kind of kept, because I'm pretty vain basically, and and so when I make the work, I'm kind of thinking, how is this work reflecting on me, and how are people going to judge it? So putting a work into the world, I always want to make sure that any work that goes out there is a work that I'm happy to stand by, and in a sense that work would be if someone only sees one work of mine and this is the work, am I okay with that? Like, is it is it a
So
good,
that's an
is it a solid
interesting
work?
question to pose yourself when you're putting something out.
Yeah. Well, because you don't know where the works go, and most of the time people do only see one work. So yeah, the vanity aspect is there, and that's part of it. However, yeah, since the Archibald stuff, of course, more people see it, more people talk about it, and I would also say that people became a little bit more robust in their critique of the work as well. Which is good. You want to have like a vigorous discourse, but when you're kind of emerging, or just sort of starting off, mostly what people say about the work is very kind, and
being supportive.
People are supportive, which is great, and people should be encouraging. But if it gets to a certain level, I guess it's like, people would feel like, well, I don't need encouragement anymore, so I'm just going to say what I actually think. And that, it can be a little bit confronting at first, but it's good. It's great, actually. It's great to have a reaction and get a range of responses to the work.
Cool. Now, has there been anyone, because I know that you've done a lot of study as well, has there been anyone instrumental in developing the processes that you use, or is it something that you've developed yourself just through trial and error?
I would say a little of both. When I was studying at RMIT doing the undergraduate course, it was a part-time course, and it was a little unusual in that we had a couple of primary lecturers, tutors, I guess, who did most of the class the whole way through the program. So it was Sally Mannell and David Thomas primarily, and so we had kind of an ongoing contact with them for like 4 years. And it's almost.
I think you'll find it's 4.5.
Okay, 4.5.
So full disclosure, Sam and I studied that together.
Yeah. And so it was almost an atelier to set up.
It was actually an incredible program.
Yeah, it was great, and I think having that extended interaction with these artists, of course, has an enormous influence over the entire career. But having said that, there's still an enormous scope and requirement to develop your own approach to making work. There's been many influences on that. Partially it's just trial and error of finding your own way. The period that probably every artist goes through, where they watch the documentaries on how other painters work and think, maybe I can adopt that, or listen to the interview with Gerhard Richter, and he won't allow whistling in the studio because that's a distraction. Okay, no more whistling. So there's all of those things going to it. Talking to other painters and other artists is always really useful about how they approach things. I've had a long friendship with Tony Lloyd, for example, the painter, and we talk about our work and our processes and setups really often. And so having, I think, some ongoing conversations, and I have conversations with a number of other artists as well that are sort of long-term ongoing conversations over a number of years, and all of those things really feed into how the work gets produced. But yeah, it's deeply personal.
Yeah.
The studio time. You're in here by yourself, and you just got to find the way that makes it work. And it's not even consistent. Like you change over time, and so it's something that works for a couple of years, and you think, okay, this is it. I found it. I'm good now. Then after a couple of years, it's like, oh, damn, it's not working anymore. I've got to find some new approach.
It's not working, or it becomes a bit stale, that you feel like you're not progressing?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, it's probably. I mean, that's probably what it is.
Because in a regular job, you would just change jobs, and the environment would be different, and you'd have to do things differently. Whereas when you're in your studio, you kind of almost have to invent that yourself. What's the change? What's different? Yeah,
that's true. And I mean, I have literally changed studios at those times. So I sort of feel like, I need to change the environment or something. And so I've been here in this studio, and then moved the studio back home, and then moved back here again, and I'm about to move again. But I don't know. It's like a level of self-awareness to know whether it's that my processes have developed some kind of problem, or is it that the work itself is hitting some kind of dead end, and I need to make some shift there, because I'm always sort of running away from problems, because that's what you do, and trying to find an easy solution to whatever difficult thing is troubling me. And so if it feels like the easiest thing is to I'm going to get up at 5:30 in the morning instead of 6:30 in the morning, and then
give that a try.
Yeah, I'll give that a try. Yeah. That definitely seems a lot easier than like reinventing my entire artistic persona.
Are there points of your process that you really struggle with?
Yes, I mean I struggle with all points of the process all the time, and I mean it's kind of, the questions are what to make and how, like they're the two things.
the biggest questions of all.
Yeah, of course. And it's incredibly glib to say that because, like, obviously that's the whole practice. But, on a day-to-day level, you sort of come in and you think, okay, and often I find, like, when I'm getting towards finishing a major work, like, I put off actually finishing it because I think I'm going to start the next thing. I'm not sure if my decision about what the next thing is 100% right yet. So yeah, those points of figuring out, this is the next work. This is what I'm going to tackle. Figuring out a way that I'm going to approach a body of work. Those are things that I definitely really struggle with. And I've got some strategies to try and get through those things, and they're more or less effective depending on my total frame of mind.
Can you share some of those strategies?
So, for example, I like to try and pick a defining theme for a show, and it's almost like it's a starting point to say, okay, the next show is going to be about, and it's usually a book that I've just read or an article or some issue that's come up that is in the realm of subject matter that I think is relevant to me. So pick that thing and say, okay, this next show is going to be about that topic, and then that helps to then structure. Okay, well, within that topic, I would have a work that deals with. So, for example, this next show, I was thinking fully automatic luxury communism was kind of the topic, which is a book, a manifesto by Aaron Bastani, talking about how automation, has the potential to restructure society. I think, okay, this sounds great. Like, I love communism. I also love luxury. So, can we have those things? So putting that into the context of the show, you sort of start thinking, well, there's a possibility for making some paintings about, what are our ideas about luxury, thinking about, the political and economic structures of society as we find them in late stage capitalism, and then thinking about the construction of the work itself. So, hence thinking about how can I automate partially the creation of paintings, which we've sort of talked about. Yeah. But then when it gets closer to the show, that the original theme might be somewhere in the past, and the actual body of work that's being presented isn't necessarily tightly structured around that particular topic. It's all of these other divergent tangents. And the most important thing really is like finding a painting that looks good and operates on all the levels that you want a painting to operate on. So the aesthetics really are the most important thing for me, but aesthetics is a very complicated subject, and it brings in the whole world and how that relates to the painting, as well as just how the painting looks on its canvas. So what does it make you think about? What's the topics that it deals with? How does it relate to society? All those things go into the aesthetics of the work. But yes, making the painting look good is number one. So having started with that topic, if I find a way to make some paintings that I think that's working and it's interesting, then I'll sort of tend to focus on that and building some works that relate to whatever it is in there that's operating, and it may or may not be tightly related to the original thing. So that's the sort of strategy that I use to get through it. Sometimes it works well, and sometimes it doesn't work so well, and then I move studios or change my alarm time. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's working pretty well for you at the moment, even though you might struggle through bits of it. But I think it's really interesting that most people wouldn't realise really that even though you might talk about the theory behind where the work comes from, they probably don't realise all the considerations that an artist makes when they're making just one piece of work. And then when you're talking about an entire exhibition, there's just so many touch points of decision making and editing that goes into that, and even just considering what everything means. It's great to get a bit more of an insight.
It's true. I mean, it's usually all like really considered.
Yeah. I think it shows. I think it does show, but I think that it's really nice that you get a chance to talk about it, because I think that when an exhibition opens, you can probably just talk about briefly, kind of what it's about. but I don't think people often get the insight of all those tiny little decisions and the angst that goes sometimes.
No, that's true. And then you sort of think about that idea that people look at a work for an average of 7 seconds and then move
are they
on.
really reading into that what you want them to read into?
Yeah.
Does it mean the same thing to me as it means to you?
Yeah, that's right. But in a way, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Yeah, because like I said, it's sort of. I think you're trying to communicate with people on an unconscious level. So you have these ideas and all of these considerations and stuff that go into the work, but you're trying to communicate them, I guess, in a way that's non-obvious or even if it is obvious, resonates at some deeper level as well. And the ideal thing, in a way, would be even if someone has absolutely no idea what the painting is about or what it refers to, maybe it gives them a feeling, and maybe the feeling is somehow connected with that original topic or theme. So that's what that's kind of in a way what you ultimately hope for. And I don't know if it sounds a little over-egging or quasi-mystical or something, but it's like you're touching on a deeper truth when you kind of get those things happening. It's okay, we had this surface level where we all communicate with each other using language and we read articles, but there's also this deeper level of connection that we all have with each other. There's this emotional connection, and we all live in the same world, and we have this shared heritage as humans that go back 1 million years of evolution, and before that, the 3 billion years of life, and all of that is kind of there with us.
Yeah.
And then you can make a painting that starts to tap into just a little bit of that. So you try and just make it go a little bit deeper all the time.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you've expressed that. It's, hopefully each work does that.
Yeah, but I mean, some works are also just jokes, so that's also fine to do a one-liner.
There is quite a lot of really subtle humour in your work, though I find that. Is that something that you, when you're working on that you consider it, that you work into your process at all? I mean, I know it's not overt kind of humour. It's in some instances quite a dark humour as well.
Yeah, I think so. It's I mean, I occasionally make works that are a little bit punny or a little bit of a joke. But I wouldn't.
Because humour is a very hard thing.
Humor is a very hard thing, and that's why I would try and avoid that question and say I knew. No, because but yeah, of course, you have a sense of humor, and that expresses itself in the work in different ways, and I do like to try and keep the work at a certain level, keep it light, because I think it's. And I sort of say that it's not just that I don't want the work to be serious, because it is, but humor is serious and play is serious and all of that sort of stuff, and it is just this emotional connection thing, and I think I just like it when you have a funny work, just something.
Well, I mean, I think probably even the idea of bringing luxury and communism together is like there's like an instant humour kind of built into that.
Yeah.
So it's probably, the way you bring really quite disparate things together, that's just maybe is the germ of that.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. It's I mean, it is trying to reconcile contradictory ideas in a sense. Even when it turns out they're not necessarily contradictory.
It's always connected in some way.
Yeah.
Great. So, in the hierarchy of things, where do you think process sits against creativity? Because they kind of at times fight each other. Do you find process for you is sort of sitting at the top, or would creativity be there and then?
I don't know that they do fight each other exactly. I mean, I guess.
don't know, because earlier it sounded like they were fighting each other a little bit.
Maybe they are. It's I mean, I feel like
because Because to put it this way to you, if you just could come up with the ideas and then it just appeared, and there's, you know, like you can have whatever ideas, but once you have to put a process to it and make it happen, you see where it gets harder.
Yeah, but it's sort of, you know, like when I'm walking the dog at 6:30 in the morning, I'll have like 40 ideas for works and things that I think, okay, that's really cool, and you know, I can have this great thing. But by the time I get into the studio, you know, usually all of them have been dismissed as, you know, ridiculous, glib, twee, or you know, I've already done that, or it's technically impossible, or all of those things, and so it's the process is a way of you know, getting those ideas into some type of reality. So, you know, ultimately, I'm trying to actually make work, literally create, and the process is the way that the things get created, and the idea is, you know, like a starting point for that process. So yeah, I don't know. It's like the creativity and the process are in a way the same thing.
Yeah, it's really true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think different people have different relationships with that sort of. But it's interesting that I feel that you put them on the same kind of level.
Yeah, you know what? One thing I did sort of, I kind of know what you mean about that. And for example, when I was studying my PhD, I found this a difficult thing to reconcile, because I was trying to do a lot of literature-based research, a lot of reading, a lot of writing, at the same time as having a studio practice that was, I guess, you know, reflecting that and in parallel. And I really struggled to reconcile those two strands of research while I was doing the PhD. It felt like, okay, I'm doing a...
They are very difficult to read together.
Yeah, and so I was like doing this body of historical research, and it was interesting, and I really enjoyed doing it. And then I'd get to the studio, and it felt like, okay, so you know, that's that, and now I concentrate on making the paintings. If I try to make a painting that uses the historical research, it's garbage. Like. Pretty much every time. So it didn't feel like there was a good way to relate one process to the other process. When I got to the end of the PhD and I put the final exhibition up, and I kind of like reread what I'd actually put down, I thought, oh, okay, it actually did work. Yeah. Like the works do actually relate to the research that I was doing, and contribute, and you know, and really the paintings, as you would hope, did inform the historical research, and not really the other way around. So like it felt at the end like it had operated, but while I was trying to do it, it didn't feel like that. It felt totally disjointed and disconnected.
Do you think that's because written research like that, and you can't be really literal about it, you have to kind of absorb it, and you can't like literally describe a word in a picture, so you have to kind of find some other way of coming at it. Even if you think you're letting go of it, you're probably completely immersed in it, so it's coming out in some way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I had this tutor, Nick Matsakis, and he was a fantastic painter and a really interesting guy, and he basically said that, you know, just do a lot of reading, and then don't worry about it. It'll just come out in the painting by itself, and you don't really need to think about how it will happen. And I guess at the time that he was saying that, I sort of thought, what are you talking about? But it does seem to operate like that. You know, you do the reading, you think about things, and eventually they find their way into the work in, you know, sometimes in ways that are unexpected, and that's good. That's good when that actually occurs.
Yeah, I think we'll probably wrap this up, and what I really want to ask you now though is if we've got young creatives watching that are struggling with their own process or don't even have a process in place, because I think that takes a while in itself to develop, Is there any sort of advice or thoughts that you could share with them that might help them find their process?
Look, I think the main thing is to make it work. It's what it boils down to, and not necessarily try and get too caught up in the process or the theory or setting things up, but to actually create the paintings. And I guess like Nick, it's like I said, do all the reading, definitely do all of that because it is important and valuable. But don't think about how that applies to the work. Just go ahead and make the work without necessarily thinking about it. Make the work that you feel like you want to make, and the theory stuff will come out. But the most important thing is just to carry on making it. And it's like was it Chuck Close? I think he said that it's like inspiration is for amateurs and the professionals just get up and and do the work. Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah, I think that's perfect to finish. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that there's many creatives that have really enjoyed hearing your process.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk about it.
Thank you.